I'm just actually going to start by introducing this project. This is a bit more of a industry-wide overview, I guess, of something that we've been very fortunate to do. Thanks for the introduction. I'm with the Critical Minerals Association of Australia. We've just started up relatively newly in Australia, and we are representing critical minerals companies exclusively in Australia, but we're part of a international group of critical minerals associations in the UK, in the US, and in Canada as well. We have been very fortunate to get some generous funding from the British government, and we'd really like to acknowledge the British High Commission here in Australia, who have actually allowed us to come together with a group of academics who have been excellent in actually trying to build a critical minerals supply chain resilience index, which is a bit of a mouthful, but the idea behind this piece of work is really looking at the global critical minerals supply chain and realising that not just as a result of COVID, but also just as a result of, monopolies in the supply chain in other parts of the world, there are some real pinch points in the supply chain. And what this project is aiming to do is to really look at how can we measure what those pinpoints are, those critical sort of blockages or bottlenecks across the international supply chain, and put some measurement around it so that governments, companies, and the industry can look at how we can actually address those pinpoints, manage and plan for the risks. So I'm actually going to hand over to Flavio and just ask him to talk through some of the methodology in the project and what we've actually done so far, and some of the challenges we've faced as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you all for having us today. Let's bring a little bit of academics to this battery conference, and it's not going to be that painful. I trust I'll be able to do a good job explaining what we are doing and why that's important. So we know that there is a rising demand for critical minerals, rising demand for lithium, for cobalt, for graphite, and so on and so forth. And we know how difficult it has been lately to secure those supply sources and to know what triggered the levers in this industry, because it is not a mature supply chain yet. It is being developed. So a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges as well. And we are trying to figure out and present to you a roadmap on how to anticipate risks, how to prepare for risks, how to help policymakers put their investment, their effort in the right places, because there's simply not enough money for everyone doing everything at the same time everywhere. So that's what we are trying to do, and we are achieving a measurement of supply chain resiliency so we can figure out what the pain points are in this supply chain. So we know there is a rise in demand, and that rise in demand is becoming critical in the coming years. And what are the sources that we can get, and how secure they are, how can we work with them, and how can we mitigate the risks? And risks, we'll see in the next slide, there are many, many ways that we can assess those risks, and then we have to start to make a few choices and figuring out what we want to prioritize. So that's what we are trying to do, some measurement. And by measurement, I'll be very specific. We're talking about crude data. We're talking about numbers. And we have seen this conference, a lot of data and numbers, but also they come from perceptions. They are what we would call more qualitative data. We want to go to the next level and try to understand what is the relationship about the data, about what has happened in the past 5 years, so that we can make have some idea of what will happen in the coming 5 to 10 to 15 years. So ideally, if you think about a major supply chain that is risk-proof, you are going through what you cannot read in this slide because there are too many letters and too many different things. You have to go through who is supplying, what are the exports, the imports, what's the cybersecurity risk, what is the geopolitical risk, what is the climate change risk involved in everything that you are doing. So in an ideal supply chain, we would be able to figure out all those elements, put them together, and do our analysis and do our predictions, and then better prepare to what comes next. As I mentioned, we are still in a green kind of supply chain because it is just a start for these battery minerals. And then we are starting with something more specific. We are looking for data for everything there is. And then what we found out is that there's not that much data out there. and then you have to dig, you have to mine that data, you have to process that data, refine that data. And when you look around, there are pieces and bits here and there. There's no such a thing as a global database about lithium, about cobalt, about all these elements of the critical mineral supply chain. And then there's a lot of distrust about data coming from China, and at the same time we know that China plays a central role in this supply chain. They are able to, in the downstream, they're responsible from 60 to 70, maybe 95% of the processing that happens after the minerals come from places like, as we saw today, Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and Australia. And then we are trying to figure out how we can work that data, how we can connect that and come up with some models that can better explain what is going on and project what will happen next. In our search for data, what we found out is that there are only a few players in the market that provide comprehensive data about things other than price. You'll find some good providers for data about price, but what about output? What about inventory? What about import? What about exports? What about capacity utilization in those places? So this is the kind of data that we are looking for. And we were fortunate to find that actually Shanghai Metal Markets, which is a Chinese enterprise, has collected that data systematically in the past 5 to 10 years. And they were able to provide that data at a reasonable, achievable price. And we are talking about over 150 different variables. And we are talking about over 60,000 points of individual data that we got hold of, and we could start doing our analysis. And I think that's an indication about how much we have to mature in other places, because if you look for that same information in other places, outside of China, it's really hard to find. So they are one step ahead for the simple fact that they are able to generate, collect, and sell and distribute that data to those interested in paying, and then some analysis on that. And that data will go on, as you can see, an output, operation rate, capacity, inventory, processing, imports, exports, price, and a lot more. So what we are doing, we are doing what academics do. We are getting that data and doing some quantitative analysis. So when you think about cobalt sulfate, what impacts the availability, the price, the risk behind cobalt sulfate? Well, we had originally over 12 variables to explore in this. And then we did a little bit of analysis, and then we figured out what are the 3 main factors that impact cobalt sulfate. And this is just one example. And then you can extrapolate that to everything that is part of the supply chain. So we're talking about over 50 different elements that we can work with. And then you can extrapolate to the combination of what impacts what influences what. And this allows us to answer and assess some questions like, hey, how does capacity utilization of tricobalt tetroxide companies, how does that in China present a risk to the supply chain, the battery supply chain? Or to what extent the move that happened in China a few years ago, expanding lithium carbonate manufacturing production from 5 specific regions that you can see on the slides to more regions, to 8 new regions, how does that affect the supply chain, the prices, availability, risk? And then you can think about everything that is part of this industry. Is everything growing at the same rate of our sales of new electrical vehicles? Who are the laggards? Because the laggards are the places where we have to put more investment in. So this is the kind of analysis that we are doing. These are the kind of questions that we are trying to answer. And then trying to figure out more information and be able to know what we know that we don't know, but we must know. We need more information about inventory. We need to be prepared to new technology. We need to better understand what is happening in China so that we can design a better, reliable, sustainable supply chain for battery materials that holds and stands for the next 20, 40, 50 years. And to do that, we do need these partnerships with associations, with industry, with governments, so we can better understand and create a body of knowledge that can be helpful for everyone. So this is us in a nutshell. So we do have Namely here, I'm Flavio, I have David, my colleague, here in the audience. And these are our contact numbers, and we are happy to explore whatever questions you have, whatever data you have, and bring our outputs to you so we can better understand what is happening in this development and evolution of the critical minerals and battery supply chains. Pretty much in a nutshell, that's it, so thank you so much.